Hey everybody, a guy named Nathan here. So on Saturday, May 30th, 2020, I spent most of the day sitting in my home here in Whidbey Island, Washington, watching the news, feeling some mixture of rage and sorrow while I watched protests take place down in Seattle. If you watch the news at all or been watching YouTube or anything like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There have been riots going on all over the country, from DC to Dallas to, of course, Minnesota, in the name of George Floyd, the unarmed, innocent black man who was murdered at the hands of a police officer. Seattle is not immune to the outrage and anything like that. So the next day, Sunday, May 31st, I took a little trek down to Seattle to see what there was to see. The following footage you're going to see was mostly just guerrilla style, off script, me filming with my little Samsung Galaxy while driving through the streets. What you're going to see at first is me driving, exiting I-5 and getting into Seattle, and then I parked and I walked over to where the action had taken place the day before at down around 1st through 6th Street on Pine and Pike. So anyway, I'm going to show you that footage, and you're welcome to watch that, and then I'm going to share some more thoughts here at the end and talk about some of the stuff that I wasn't able to film. So doing this, I'm gonna go ahead and start filming. I just pulling into Seattle here. This image is super blurry. I'm gonna mount the phone here in my steering wheel. I just drove through, not exactly a barricade, but I wish I'd been filming it. I'll see if I can't get a shot or two of it on my way out. But I-5 is blocked off south. I had to take the 67th Street exit because all the other exits were barricaded by cones and by police. I-5 started getting super empty right around the time we enter Seattle. There are still pedestrians. There's still people on bikes and people walking around, but as you can kind of see here, I'm coming up on this red light here. I'm not sure this is doing it justice, but the streets are very, very empty. More so than usual. Feels more like an evening in Mount Vernon than it does Seattle, anytime, day or night. Seattle's pretty much always busy. Yeah. Yesterday, let's see, today is May 31st, Sunday, May 31st, 2020. Yesterday, there were riots all around Pine, where I'm headed right now, and that whole area down there, the part of Seattle everybody knows and cares about. There was tear gassing, and it was all over the news. I spent a couple hours watching it. I'm at the intersection of Mercer and Eastlake right now. I'm gonna see if I can't find an area to pull off and park. It's going to be tricky to do. Parking in Seattle is always a pain in the butt, but it might be a little easier right now. I'm on the corner coming up on the corner of 6th and Westlake. You can see they got some cop cars with the lights on. I'm going to zoom in here. Homeless sleeping there. Little tent there. I'm going to do this in little short sections here. I've got my mask on. I'm going to do a quick... there I am. Hope that comes out looking all right. Here, I'm gonna get a shot of this. This is an example. Never seen this before. Now, admittedly, I don't live here in Seattle. I'm here about once a month these days. It's eerie. It's clean. It's, for the most part, very clean. Although I've already walked past about 3 homeless people. But there's definitely just this vibe that it's not usually here. It's strangely quiet. I'm walking out into the road right now. These are empty. These are desolate, even with the little traffic we have. Normally Seattle is bustling day and night, and it's just very vacant. I'm gonna go back to the sidewalk because there's a street sweeper coming up. Definitely been a cleanup. I see a lot of these Department of Transportation barricades, and it's after 5, so that curfew, well, I'm not sure how strictly enforced it is. I see cop cars and I saw a few police officers earlier. There's that street sweeper. But I don't see riot gear, police, or anything like that. So far, I'm going to stop here and just observe. I'm on the corner of 3rd and Stewart. It's clean. It's very clean. This is actually surprising and encouraging. How it's hard to believe that anything went down in this vicinity. But it's very eerie. Very eerie. It's very quiet. And I feel very uncomfortable filming right now. So there's definitely cop cars and definitely a very strong presence of everybody stay calm. We don't want any more trouble. It's weird. Very eerie. So I'm going to stop filming. I'm going to keep observing. At this point, I want to do a quick interjection and mention that between when I stopped filming at this point, I walked through Pikes Place and along the pier, and it was ghost town empty. It was eerie. For anybody who's ever been to Seattle, you know how bustling Pikes Place usually is, especially during the spring and summer months. I've gone busking there, and if you've never been there, I literally just imagine every demographic of human being you can think of: white, black, Asian, Hispanic, straight, gay, trans, whatever you can think of. I've seen it there, walking along the streets, shoulder to shoulder, packed. It's almost comical. It's almost like something out of sci-fi. You see people walking around speaking any language you can imagine. I've stood there with my guitar and just people watched a few times while playing songs, and it's amazing. And I didn't bother taking any pictures, any videos, because I had limited space on my phone, but it was absolutely desolate. No shops, no pedestrians, no traffic, nothing. And it was bizarre. It was very bizarre to see. That said, I'm going to continue with what I did see. I want to get a shot of this. We got camouflaged marching down 5th and Union. We've gone to 6th where the action was happening. We still got some protesters, you can see here. Helicopter flying overhead and starting to get noisy and starting to get dark. I think things might start back up, but we got these barricades all over 6th where the bulk of the action was happening. Union Street, 6th, 5th, all that. See the helicopter out there, you can hear it. Barricade here. I have seen some no justice, no peace graffiti and some spray painted out security cameras. So I'm going to stop filming and try to get some stills of this. This is where we got more rally happening. Well, there's cops, National Guard lined up all along the sides. I've talked to some of them. They are very polite. They're very cool. The general vibe here is nobody really wants any more violence, chaos. But here we got continued rally and protest going on. The authorities are being very cooperative. Nobody's trying to incite violence, as far as I can see. We got demonstrations happening. Okay. Some movement. I'm pretty sure the sirens are just for show, because I don't see. I'm gonna run out of film time either way. Okay, folks. So you can see the video ends right as I make it to the Black Lives Matter crowd congregating, and there were people there speaking through bullhorn. You could see in the background, the video doesn't really do it justice, but there were lines of Seattle PD, and then right behind them were the National Guard. And I stopped filming there for two very important reasons. One, I won't lie, I was nervous and I wanted to keep my wits about me. As you can see, I had my video on. I was still trying my best to keep my distance from the crowd, this whole social distancing thing. But two, I was also running out of space on my phone to film, which is a bit of a shame. There was some stuff that I really wish I'd gotten. Also, though, I will say this: there were, everybody there had their phones out. There were film crews, there were news crews. So pretty much anything you hear me talk about now, you can go to TikTok or Facebook or something like that, and you're gonna find it. But one of the biggest things I want to tell everybody who's watching this is this. First of all, at the Black Lives Matter rally, there was every shade of human being you can imagine. There were, of course, a number of black people, but there were white, Hispanic, Asian people there holding up signs, standing in solidarity. And it was definitely a mix of people. This was not white people versus black people. This was a mix of people coming together saying enough is enough, and supporting each other. One of the biggest things I want you all to know is that the Black Lives Matter folks, they were absolutely opposed to violence. Absolutely opposed to it. The day before in Seattle, there were cars on fire. There was shattered glass. It was chaos. And like you saw in the earlier footage, I got there. It was surprisingly clean, remarkably clean. Seattle's usually a pretty clean city as far as things go, but there was really almost no sign. There was graffiti, and there were sprayed out security cameras and things like that, but there was very little sign of any chaos. So and that's really important. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this video, is because there was that, and there was also a number of occasions where people tried to provoke the police. There was a very angry young black man who was shouting at the cops, cussing them out. A friend of his, another black man, was there with him doing the classic hold him back, no, we're not going to do this. But also there was another young white man who came up and just calmly said, man, we don't want you to be the next victim. Just take a deep breath, stand down. This isn't worth it. We're here to peacefully share our message. Inversely, there was another occasion where a young white man wanted to walk through the police line to cross the street at I think it was 5th, and the police told him he had to go around another block, and he shouted, "Fuck that!" Started marching through the line. The cops were shouting, "Stand down," gripping their batons, and another young white man stood right between them, hands on this guy's chest, and said, "No, we have worked too hard. Just stand down and walk around." There was this tiny little 4 foot nothing little black woman who anytime anybody tried to provoke the police, she would throw herself and just right between the police and those trying to instigate any sort of violence and say, "No, we are not here for violence. Calm down. We're here to talk. We're here to listen. We're here to be heard. We're here to communicate. We're here to cooperate." And on that note, I want to tell you all, the cops themselves, I'd spent most of my day actually speaking to police officers and a few National Guardsmen as well. There were a number of women for both SPD and the National Guard. There were black men in uniform. And by and large, they didn't want problems either. The most profound thing I experienced that day, Sunday the 31st, was after listening to the rallies, after watching people congregate together, marching down the hills, and everything like that, I took a moment and I walked around to the intersection of, I believe it was 4th and Stewart, and And I had to walk through the barricade to do it. I had to walk up to this line of SPD, and I just politely said, may I pass? And they said, yes, you may. I walked through, and I was headed back to my car because I had to leave at 10 o'clock that night. I had to work that night, and I'm walking to my car, and I stopped, and I'm watching this line of police officers who are kind of assembling their gear, but they're very mellow. They're very laid back, bantering amongst themselves, and even talking to pedestrians that were walking past. And I stood and watched them for a bit. And this one guy, who's probably about my age, in his early 40s, saw my shirt, which would be this one right here. I decided to wear my Esperanto shirt. If you know what Esperanto is, cool. If you don't, Google it. I'm not going to get into it right now. But I will say I decided to wear my shirt intentionally because Esperanto is all about brotherhood and communication and peace and people coming together across borders and nationalities and ethnicities. And this police officer, he asked me about this shirt. He introduced himself as Clay, and I told him all about Esperanto, and he said, that's actually very cool. We just got to talking about life, where are you from, all that kind of stuff. And once we kind of connected a dialogue, we created a connection. I asked him, I said, how do you feel about this? And he looked at me and he said, man, I tell you, if you ask pretty much any police officer here tonight, they'll agree. What happened to George Floyd was reprehensible and absolutely wrong. He said, so I understand. He said, I understand why these people are protesting. I agree with them, and I want them to be able to communicate. I want them to be heard. At the same time, I've got to do my job. I've got to keep the peace. And that was really the vibe. That was really very much the vibe. There was a lot of tension, but there was also a strange amount of cooperation, even amongst the authorities. As the night wore on, he and I chatted for a bit. I ended up escorting a young woman named Amy back to the crowd. We had to go a couple blocks down, walk through the barricade, and get her to the crowd. And I ended up coming back. And about 10 o'clock, I got back to my car, and I walked to where Clay and his row of SPD had been. They'd moved down a little bit. They had put on their gas masks and were moving towards employing tear gas. But again, they were surprisingly civil about it. There were a few police officers that looked at me and a couple surrounding pedestrians and said, if you need to go, now's a good time to go. We are going to start moving the protesters away. We need to start dispersing. There was a curfew in order, but nobody bothered enforcing it. I mean, the police officers knew it was there, but they didn't bother. They mentioned it a few times, but they were that cooperative, if you will. Before I left, I walked past that row of police officers and a couple of protesters, and I popped my mask off when I saw Clay, and he had his riot gear on, and I gave him a wave and a salute and a thumbs up, and he gave me a nod back, and I said, be safe, be careful. He gave me a nice polite nod, and I said the same thing to several protesters, and then I had to leave. And I did pull up King 5 News on the drive home and listen to it via my phone. And the things for the most part were better than they were Sunday. So a couple points I want to make, and I'll keep this short because I'm running out of time on my phone. This was not about white versus black America. These are people that are at a boiling point. There are so many allies for the BLM movement that are they're put out with police brutality, they're put out with the Trump administration, they're people like me that are put out with family court, that are at their wits' end with things like feminism and they're just, this quarantine, this COVID, all of that is just wearing people out. And that's really what this is about, is frustrated people being pushed to the limit. A lot of people have been talking about another U.S. Civil War. I wish I disagreed, but I think we're going to see a lot more separation of the four corners of the United States in the next decade. And that's a topic for another video. But what I do want to end on is this. I spoke with both protesters, I spoke with police officers, I spoke with white people, black people, and here's what I want everybody to know. The dialogue is there. The connection is there. There are allies to the BLM. There are law enforcement officers that just want to do their job as best their ability, who are hearing us, who agree with us, who want safety and want what's best for their community. And there are real people inside that army, that body armor. I know a lot of my liberal friends are going to bristle at this, but no, really, we talk about the real lives of the black people that are dying at the hands of these officers. These are real people with families and with their own personal histories to deal with. Keep that dialogue alive. Keep that dialogue alive. But the biggest thing that got very little news coverage were the volunteers in Seattle that cleaned up the streets, cleaned up the broken glass, barred up the storefronts and everything like that. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. We're still a community, and we are in this together. And the best thing we can do is pull together and do the best we can to look out for each other. So stay as safe as you can, and look out for yourself, look out for your family, look out for your neighbor. Take care of yourself. Let's get through this together.